In 1991, Nintendo humiliated Sony on a live conference stage, killing their partnership and sending a message: stay out of gaming. Sony had no consoles, no studios, no foothold in the industry. 3 decades and more than 500 million units later, PlayStation didn't just compete, it redefined every generation of gaming. How one rejection built the most dominant console brand in history starts with the deal that fell apart. In the late 1980s, Sony and Nintendo allied to bring CDR-OM technology to the Super Famicom. Lead engineer Ken Kutaragi designed a hybrid prototype, the Nintendo PlayStation, capable of reading both cartridges and Sony's proprietary discs. But the contract terms alarmed Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi. Sony would retain complete control over software licensing and disc royalties, threatening Nintendo's lucrative cartridge monopoly. Yamauchi secretly signed a rival deal with Philips. Days later, at the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show, Sony publicly announced the partnership, only for Nintendo to blindside them the next morning by unveiling their new alliance. Furious, Sony president Norio Oga refused to retreat, authorizing Kutaragi to build an independent, standalone competitor. On December 3, 1994, Sony released the PlayStation in Japan, initiating a global rollout that reached North America and Europe by September 1995. This system abandoned traditional silicon cartridges in favor of compact disc technology. While standard cartridges maxed out at 64 megabytes, a single PlayStation disc offered 650 megabytes of storage. Because discs cost pennies to manufacture compared to expensive plastic cartridges, publishers faced far fewer financial risks and could print software in days rather than months. The massive storage allowed developers to implement fully orchestrated soundtracks, pre-rendered video, and expansive three-dimensional environments. Early hits like Ridge Racer and Battle Arena Toshinden proved that high-performance 3D games could run seamlessly in the living room. Enticed by lower production costs and creative freedom, industry giants like Namco, Konami, and Square migrated to the new system. This shift turned a once-rejected media format into a dominant commercial platform, driving the PlayStation to sell over 102 million units worldwide and become the first console to cross the 100 million milestone. Before a single game even loaded, the console had to earn a permanent spot at the center of the household. It could no longer exist just as a toy for enthusiasts. It had to appeal to the entire family. On March 4, 2000, Sony launched the PlayStation 2 in Japan, followed by North America and Europe later that fall. Arriving at a retail price of $299, the system featured vastly superior hardware, driven by a custom processor designed to handle complex three-dimensional environments. Yet, the real breakthrough was the inclusion of a built-in DVD drive. At a time when standalone DVD players often cost more than the console itself, movie buyers and families purchased the system solely for home entertainment. This dual-purpose identity bridged the gap between active players and casual viewers, expanding the reach of who a game console was actually for. The true revolution of this era was not just the machine itself, but the massive software wave that redefined what interactive entertainment could achieve. In 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3 shattered the traditional level-based structure of gaming, replacing it with a fully realized three-dimensional sandbox where players dictated the action. Its sequels, Vice City and San Andreas, expanded this concept into massive cultural milestones, proving that a virtual environment could capture the public imagination. This was the moment gaming grew up. Blockbusters like God of War and Metal Gear Solid established PlayStation as a prestige platform, delivering adult narratives, cinematic drama, and mythic scale. Meanwhile, Gran Turismo grounded the system in hyper-realistic technical precision and unmatched polish. Together, this software library drove the hardware to a historic milestone, pushing lifetime sales past 160 million units. The PlayStation 2 did not just dominate the market, it proved that video games were no longer a niche hobby, turning the console into a primary pillar of global pop culture and establishing Sony as the definitive home for blockbuster design. In late 2006, Sony launched its most ambitious hardware yet, the The PlayStation 3 was a computing powerhouse, but its engineering came at a staggering cost. Pricing the system at $499 and $599 alienated buyers, allowing Microsoft's cheaper Xbox 360 to build an early lead. Developers struggled with the complex cell processor, while Sony's massive gamble on the new Blu-ray format kept manufacturing costs high. To recover, Sony rebuilt its approach from the ground up. They launched the PlayStation Network, providing a free online foundation that connected millions of players without a subscription barrier. Soon, unmatched first-party software rescued the system's reputation. Cinematic triumphs like Uncharted 2, God of War 3, and Little Big Planet proved the hardware's ultimate capabilities, culminating in the storytelling peak of The Last of Us. The PlayStation 3 turned an expensive misstep into a comeback story, teaching Sony a hard lesson about practicality before the next generation. For the 2013 launch of the PlayStation 4, Sony appointed Mark Cerny as lead system architect to completely rebuild their hardware philosophy. Cerny abandoned the complex design of the past in favor of a simplified, developer-friendly PC architecture using an x86 64-bit CPU and 8 GB of unified GDDR5 RAM. This standardized layout significantly lowered development costs and cut down production timelines, allowing studios to port games seamlessly. By prioritizing the needs of creators, Sony instantly recaptured the industry's momentum. On the service front, PlayStation Plus became a mandatory pillar for online multiplayer, securing a massive, recurring digital community. Meanwhile, blockbuster first-party exclusives leveraged this practical power to deliver unrivaled visual polish and storytelling. The PlayStation 4 became a runaway commercial triumph, moving over 117 million units and solidifying Sony's market leadership. On November 12, 2020, PlayStation moved past the limits of raw horsepower to target the final barrier in modern gaming: time. The PlayStation 5 replaced traditional hard drives with a custom 825GB solid-state drive, moving a massive 5.5 GB of raw data every single second. This speed completely redefined game design, turning long loading screens into instant transitions. Visuals reached a new phase with hardware-accelerated ray tracing, rendering realistic reflections and light in real time. On the sensory front, the DualSense controller used haptic feedback and adaptive triggers to let players physically feel in-game actions. By including backward compatibility with over 4,000 PlayStation 4 titles, this transition preserved decades of player history instead of forcing them to start over. The system became less of a traditional console and more of a seamless, integrated platform. To free creators from manufacturing limits, Sony chose the compact disc. To turn gaming into a shared family experience, they integrated the DVD player. To unite players globally, they established an online network, transitioning from local physical discs to a connected digital ecosystem. To remove the final barrier of player downtime, they replaced spinning platters with ultra-fast solid-state storage. Over 3 decades, this drive to solve the limitations of the past transformed a gray box into a global lifestyle. Subscribe to Every Generation for more premium documentaries about the evolution of the world's most iconic technologies, products, brands, and games. Sony's gaze now looks past the physical console under the television. Patent filings and strategic roadmaps point to an ecosystem where cloud streaming, machine learning, and modular hardware configurations decouple the PlayStation experience from any single box. Instead of a fixed device, the brand is positioning itself as an adaptable platform capable of delivering high-fidelity play across handhelds, desktops, and mobile screens. Having solved the historical bottlenecks of storage media, network connectivity, and loading speeds, Sony faces a completely new challenge. The next era is not about how much power can fit inside a plastic chassis, but how fluidly that power follows the player. Today, gaming is transcending physical consoles entirely. As cloud networks and artificial intelligence redefine play, Sony's legacy isn't the hardware, but the global culture it created. Subscribe to Every Generation for more documentaries exploring the evolution of iconic technology.